Hi, I'm Susan Kraut. This is Richard Deutsch. We are both painters and we both teach at the Art Institute in Chicago. And we are very thrilled because we're having a show in this beautiful house in the middle of the prairie in Riverwoods. It opened today and it will be open until through February 28th. And we had the most beautiful sunlight today pouring in, and that's great because we're both obsessed really with light in our paintings and how to recreate what we've experienced. Richard is obsessed with the light, often reflecting on water, and I go right to try to paint those clouds, which are impossibly complicated and ever-changing.
I think to speak a little bit about our process, we both begin with images that are culled from our everyday life, and we begin with direct observation of some image that strikes us, and those images are brought back to the studio and built up through a long process where the images are distilled, and the surfaces of our paintings are often a result of that kind of rumination of building and tearing down and rebuilding an image. And it's not there just for itself, but it's really a product of the process of finding the image and isolating the image. Susan mentioned that I think we're both in search of not just describing the places that we've visited, but the effect that the experience of being in that light and in that place and in front of that form has upon us.
And I want to talk a little bit about the differences. Even though we have sort of similar obsessions, we work very differently. The paintings look different. Richard's are often, there's a kind of a solitary, almost a metaphoric object. But his surfaces are very different. He works with casein on a very rough surface. And so you see the texture, you see all the colors underneath coming through. My paintings are much more traditional. I work in oil, and I always work on a very flat surface. I usually paint on a masonite board or on paper. And the surface is built up just with layers and layers of strokes. I tend to paint thinly, but every inch of the painting has hours and hours of brush strokes.
I think another difference is that I tend to focus on a single image, one painting, for a long period of time and stay just focused on that image. And Susan, I think, works on around the room on a number of different images. In fact, I'm always finding her picking up paintings from a year or two earlier and going back in and rebuilding them, rethinking them. I'm really much more kind of single-minded once I start on a painting. I stay with it until it alone is resolved, and it might have something to do with the singularity of my images as well.
And I would say when we meet and talk about our work, we are very similar. Oh, I didn't have enough time in the studio. I'll never get this painting finished. I'm still reworking it. We share that. A lot of artists like the immediacy, the gesture, the directness. We both have a much more, I like the word ruminative, that we build it up, think about it, simple little shifts and adjustments. Although I think the final image looks quite different between us, but there's a similarity.
I think another similarity is that there's a great deal of resolution in our paintings, both of our paintings, and but the process is not resolved in that sense. It's quite a fluid process for both of us. And so that's kind of staying with an image until there's a great deal of coalescing of different elements, and the result is a very resolved kind of image. And I think that we're both very interested in something that feels, in that sense, like nature. It hits you like that on the piece.
And it couldn't be any other way. When you kind of get to a point that's close to finish, it's like, yes, this is what it was meant to be. This is how it was meant to live. But it can be months in the process. I tend to work on many paintings at once because the oil is wet and I have to put them aside and I keep going back and forth. I think Richard tends to find an image, stick with it, and work on it over and over and over again.
You know, we're both well traveled with materials, and so you find the longer you work, you find the right material to allow you to do the things that you want to do. So for me, a fast drying paint, which Cassine is, allows me to stay with one image and not have to move to another one. But that's the way I can stay, I can concentrate most intensely. I think Susan's way of concentrating is to actually enjoy those breaks between, I'm projecting here, but enjoy those breaks where you move from one image to another, and everybody's concentration in the studio is very unique.
Yeah.
It's our job in a way always to find how to concentrate, which is what painting really is.
Which is the beginning when you're looking at something, and then the whole process is about looking, concentrating, paying attention.
I think for both of us being representational painters, there's a twofold process. The first begins in the experience. Something has affected us, and in the natural world. And for us, it has a great deal to do with landscape. And then that experience is brought back into the studio, which is a very different kind of experience. The studio is a very controlled place. Nature is a very wild place. And it's the fusing of those two kinds of experiences that I would say we're both after. And how to get there is the trick.
Yeah.